Hey everyone, it's Lydia, and in this Kernza in Context video, we will be answering the question, what is a grain and why are they important? Now, you might think you already know the answer to at least the first question. You can probably even think of some examples of grains, like wheat or rice. But what is it that makes a grain and not something else, like a nut? In this video, we will be basing our definition of grains on the one found in the Encyclopedia of Sustainability, Natural Resources and Sustainability from the entry on grains. There, grains are defined primarily by how they're harvested and used rather than their physical characteristics. In the entry, 5 primary characteristics are outlined to define grains. 1. Grains are seeds that dry on a plant before they're harvested. 2. Grains do not have to be picked by hand and can be easily harvested mechanically. 3. Grains can be threshed and otherwise processed in bulk rather than individually. 4. Grains are considered the primary product of the plant that produces them. And 5. Grains are rich in macronutrients such as carbohydrates, fats, or protein. So, what does that all look like together? Let's take a look at wheat, one of the most famous grains, as an example. Wheat is allowed to dry entirely before it's harvested, which is done mechanically with a combine. That combine will also take care of the threshing, leaving only the naked seed to be transported away. Other parts of the wheat plant might be harvested for use. For example, the stalks might be turned into straw. But it's undeniable that the most valuable part of the plant is the grain. And of course, wheat provides plenty of carbohydrates for foods like breads and pastas. So wheat is an obvious example of a grain, but not all grains look the same. In fact, there are 4 main categories of grain: cereal grains, legume grains, which are also called pulses, oil seeds, and pseudocereals. Let's take a look at each one. Cereal grains are the poster children of the grains. They provided the blueprint for the primary characteristics of grains that we went over earlier in the video. They're high in carbohydrates and count in their ranks some of the most important staple crops in the world. Some people even consider cereal grains to be the only grains. So, what makes something a cereal grain? First of all cereal grains are harvested from plants in the Poaceae or grass family. And secondly, cereal grains are high in carbohydrates, containing 80 to 60% carbs. Examples of cereal grains include wheat, rice, and corn, barley, sorghum, millets and oats, and rye. The second type of grains are legume grains, which are also called pulses. Legume grains are high in protein and complement the carbs in cereal grains to form an excellent base for human nutrition. This might be why legume grains were domesticated in parallel to cereal grains. For example, beans were domesticated alongside corn. Lentils and chickpeas grew with wheat and barley, and soybeans came along with rice. All legume grains are harvested from plants in the Fabaceae or pea family. Legume grains are high in protein, containing 20 to 40% protein, and examples of legume grains include chickpeas, cowpeas, lentils, and common beans such as red beans, black beans, or pinto beans. The third type of grains are oil seeds. Unlike the last 2 categories, oil seeds can come from several different plant families and are categorized on their ability to create oil rather than physical characteristics. Of course, there are oil crops, such as olives and palm fruit, that are not grains and therefore not oil seeds. Something is considered an oil seed if it meets all the criteria for being a grain and is primarily used for oil and has a high fat content. Examples of oil seeds are sunflower seeds, canola, linseed, and sesame seeds. The final category of grains are pseudocereals, which include most grains that don't fall into the previous categories. Pseudocereals can also come from several different plant families as long as it's not Poaceae or the grasses. because that would make them cereals. You can tell if a grain is a pseudo-cereal if it looks like a cereal grain in appearance but does not come from the grass family, and if it has similar nutritional qualities to cereal grains, which means having high carb content. Examples of pseudo-cereals are quinoa, buckwheat, and amaranth. So there you have it, the 4 main types of grains: cereals, legume grains, oilseeds, and pseudo-cereals. Now, there are some types of food that might seem like grains at first glance, but actually fall into other categories. For example, nuts provide plenty of protein, and they're the primary product of the trees that produce them. However, they're not typically mechanically harvested, and they can be difficult to clean, and this often happens individually. On the other hand, certain spices come from seeds that are harvested mechanically. However, they rarely supply major nutrients like fat, protein, or carbohydrates, so they're not considered grains. Grains provide essential macronutrients to human diets, which are nutrients your body needs in large amounts to function. The main macros are carbs, proteins, and fat, which, as we have seen, can all be found in grains. A healthy diet consists of about 45 to 65% carbs, 10 to 35% protein, and 20 to 35% fat. As you can imagine, since grains are so great at providing these nutrients, we eat a lot of them. According to the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations, or FAO, about 52% of the food available to humans in 2022 came from grains. And although all kinds of people use grains to provide key macronutrients, the most vulnerable, such as those living in developing countries, rely on grains the most. So grains are really important for human food security. Since we're eating so many grains and feeding them to our animals, we're also using a lot of land to grow them. According to the FAO, around 74% of cropland harvested in 2022 was used for growing grains. And these intensive growing of annual grains has led to several problems, such as soil erosion, water pollution, and greenhouse gas emissions. These phenomena in turn make it more difficult to grow grains, which kind of makes grains their own worst enemy. A lot of these problems stem from the fact that nearly all grains are harvested from annual plants, which has to be replaced and fertilized every year. One way we could address these problems is by finding perennial plants to harvest grains from instead. And this is exactly what people are beginning to do with new types of grain crops, such as Kernza perennial grain. These perennial grains can be planted once and come back every year, with deep root systems that keep soil healthier and are beneficial to the water and air as well. If you want to know more about Kernza, you can look at the introductory video to this Kernza in Context series that tells a little bit about its story. Or you can visit the kernza.org website and look through the Kernza in Context lessons. For example, the What is a Grain lesson that this video is based on. So now you're fully prepared to define and identify grains, and you know why they're so important for human culture and nutrition. I hope you found this video useful, and have a good day. I'll see you next time. Bye.